let's dive right into the Indian market for December 22nd and 23rd, 2025. Now, if you just glanced at the headlines, you might think nothing really happened. But believe me, under the surface, it was a whole different story. We saw this fierce battle brewing between sectors. A precious metal hit an absolutely unbelievable record high, and a huge corporate deal was set in motion that's going to reshape an entire industry. So we're going to unpack the hidden stories behind these three massive events. First up, let's look at the numbers that tell the real story of the market's performance, not just the one you see at first glance. And this is where it gets really interesting. On December 23rd, the main indices, well, they barely budged. The Sensex was down a tiny fraction, the Nifty up just a hair. You'd be forgiven for thinking it was a totally sleepy, boring day. But that flat line, it hides a ton of drama. What was really going on was this classic tug of war between different parts of the market. You'll hear people call it sector rotation. Basically, money is flowing out of one industry and pouring into another. So while some heavy hitters were pulling the market down, others were pulling up with some incredible strength, and the result was that flat finish. Let's see who was on each side of the road. And here's the scorecard for that day. You know, in the green corner, you had public sector enterprises and metals, both pulling the market higher. But in the red corner, the heavyweight IT sector, well, it decided to take a breather, dipping almost a full percent. This fight is exactly what created that illusion of a calm market. But hey, that was just Tuesday. If we rewind the clock to Monday, December 22nd, the picture was completely different. The real engine of the week's rally came from two specific areas that were frankly on fire: technology and consumer stocks. Okay, so let's look at the big winners. You had the consumer giant Trent surging nearly 4%. Shriram Finance was right there with it, and the IT bellwether Wipro jumped over 3%. Now, these aren't just little bumps. These are serious, single-day moves from major companies, and that signals some real investor confidence. So what was the fuel for this fire? Well, for the IT sector, it was this wave of optimism, mostly coming from new global deals. Meanwhile, for consumer stocks and financials, the story was much closer to home. We're talking strong domestic spending and a really positive outlook on the Indian economy. To put it simply, people were buying, and investors were just following the money.
But the action wasn't just in stocks, not by a long shot. We need to pivot to a totally different part of the market that was telling an even more dramatic story: commodities. And specifically, we're talking precious metals.
In fact, if you had to pick the single most shocking number from the entire week, the one piece of data that made everyone sit up and go, whoa, what was that? What do you think would be? It's this: 2,15,883 rupees per kilogram. Silver futures on the MCX didn't just climb, they absolutely smashed their all-time record. Just a stunning, incredible new peak for the white metal. But that record high, it didn't just pop up out of nowhere. No, it's the peak of a massive, massive rally that has seen silver prices skyrocket an incredible 134% in just 1 year. This isn't a blip. This is a powerful, sustained trend. And it wasn't just silver having a moment. The entire metals complex was strong. You had silver being driven by tight supply and huge industrial demand. Gold was catching a bid as a safe haven in a pretty volatile market. And then there's copper, which was surging thanks to mine disruptions and all that ongoing infrastructure spending. It was really a perfect storm for metals. All right, so from these big macro trends, let's zoom in on a major micro event. It's time to shift gears to the biggest piece of corporate news of the week: a mega merger in the cement industry, orchestrated by the Adani Group. So, before we get into the nitty-gritty, it's really important to understand how they're doing this. It's called a share swap. And it's pretty simple, really. Instead of paying cash for a company, the buyer just issues its own stock to the shareholders of the company it's buying. It's a clean, cashless way to get a deal done. And this breaks down the whole process perfectly. First up, Ambuja Cements Board gave the green light to merge with ACC and Orient Cement. The mechanism? That all-stock share swap we just talked about. The specific ratio for Orient shareholders is set at 14 Ambuja shares for every 100 they own, and the big outcome is the creation of a much larger, more integrated cement powerhouse under that Adani umbrella.
So we've covered a rotating stock market, a commodity hitting insane record highs, and a huge corporate merger. The big question is, what do all these signals mean going forward? Let's try to connect the dots and look at the key takeaways.
All right, so here's what to keep on your radar. First, expect this market choppiness to stick around, especially with the Nifty expiry coming up. Second, the big question is whether this rotation into IT and metals has the legs to keep going. Also, keep an eye on small cap stocks. They're showing some real signs of life. And just a practical note, a friendly reminder that the